Poster's note: this chapter has had a sex scene edited out of it. To let you know where the edit is, there will be a ******. End Poster's note. The Chaotic Touch of Harmony. By Law Abiding Pony. Chapter 20. The Herd. Author's note: this one is shorter than usual along with a little lovemaking, so the next chapter can focus on plot instead of clop. End author's note. The following morning barely existed for Toon's household. Alexia didn't rise from the dead until the crack of noon. Sunday was her off day as far as camp meetings and events were concerned, so she had time enough to herself as her housemates slept off the alcohol-induced comas. For a brief moment she glanced at the green mare who was snoring while she was draped over the sleeping Conrad. Toon was too drowsy to react to it, so she went through her waking routine of a large bowl of alfalfa and orange juice, before beginning her morning hygiene. The last bit of her routine was new. Alexia pushed the living room furniture away from the center and pulled a cushion off for herself. With the floor cleared, she brought over a small potted plastic plant, a hardback book, and a banana. After sitting on her haunches and making herself comfortable, she closed her eyes to begin meditating. It first began with inner sight. To soothe her mind, first looked to her unborn children. Because of the mana flare, the twins were brighter than ever before, but that was within the norm Twilight said they would be. With her fears dissuaded, she moved her attention to her own itinerous system. Previously only her carbuncle and the multitude of capillaries glowed with mana. Now the surrounding tissue 2 inches away from the pulsing carbuncle was illuminated with mana that was steadily spreading out in every direction. From what Sensei told me, my mana pool won't begin to become problematic until it's 3 times larger than it is now. Given that my carbuncle is producing mana like I'm on the verge of death from mana exhaustion, that means I have barely 2 days to get this under control before I flare again. But every correction I make will delay that until I reach a safe point. Toon remembered Twilight's words on the topic. As you personally witnessed, the first mana flare is dangerous, but if you learn how to control your power, it can ultimately be a great boon to you. However, you should know that any subsequent mana flares are a result of your body not being able to properly contain your mana. The reason a mana flare is next to impossible for any other pony is because the carbuncle is perfectly suited to hold mana within itself and knows when it cannot contain any more, causing it to stop mana production. With ponies like you and me, our carbuncle redesigns both itself and the rest of your body to act a little differently. The rest of your body now acts as the receptacle for your mana instead of just the carbuncle. A side effect of this metamorphosis is that your carbuncle's ability to manufacture mana is doubled right out of the gate, and that production rate will only increase with time. But this is hardly a perfect evolution. The same mechanisms that tell the carbuncle when to stop producing mana don't work anymore and they need to be corrected manually. The problem is compounded by the fact that the rest of your cells now act as your mana reservoir. That may sound like an immense boon at first. After all, the size difference between your carbuncle alone and the entirety of your body is enormous. The problem arises in the fact that the cells outside your carbuncle are used to consuming mana, not storing it. After all, your heart and lungs were designed for circulation and respiration. So you can understand why they would not be very good at storing mana right off the bat. That is where directed adaptation comes into play. This is a highly specialized method of mana control, and only has one use: to repair a pony's itinerous system after a mana flare. Without enacting this adaptation, your carbuncle will keep pushing more and more mana into the rest of your body. This will eventually reach critical mass and you will expel most of your mana in a more violent fashion than the first flare. Alexia chased away the memories to center herself. Several minutes passed filled with a clearing mind and steady breathing. Twilight's instructions flittered at the edge of her awareness. The first step to reharmonizing your magic is to stabilize the mana in the surrounding tissue. While maintaining her inner sight, Alexia watched her destabilized mana respond to her command as she reached out to the potted plant and told it to orbit slowly around her head. Again her itinerous system reflected the circulatory system. The carbuncle was currently expelling all produced mana into the surrounding tissues instead of keeping any within itself. Her current spell work pulled mana from those tissues and into the carbuncle to then be sent into her horn and other parts of her body as needed. Through the use of magic, you will see the errors left behind by the mana flare. While these errors are not enough to impair functionality as of yet, it can and will cause your health to decline rapidly if left untreated. With the techniques and knowledge I have shared with you on directed adaptation, you will be able to rid yourself of these errors. In time, the risk of a second flare will become nearly non-existent and this altered itinerous system will be a great boon to you. By levitating all three objects and making them orbit around her, Alexia saw the countless errors within her mana system reveal themselves. The sheer scope of the task ahead of her was frightening and almost caused her to lose her center. It took an additional 10 minutes for her mind to calm enough to begin the arduous task of debugging herself. Minutes turned into hours as the world around the silver unicorn vanished. She started with the most glaring flaws and slowly corrected them as Twilight instructed. Much to her increasing chagrin, she wished to work on her children first so that they would continue to develop without risk. However, Twilight warned that the bigger threat was Alexia herself. So with great reluctance, the future mother was forced to work on herself to ensure all three of them would have a future. It was not until 3 in the afternoon when Loki cracked her eyes open. The bed underneath her groaned at her weight and shifted to push her off. She looked at the mound of brown fur for over a minute before realizing whose bed she was in and was snapped into lucidity. "Ah, don't tell me I finally get laid and I was too drunk to remember it." Conrad was only half listening to the voice next to his ear until he made two important connections. The feminine voice spoke of sex, and it didn't belong to Alexia. He rolled off his back to stare at the bleary mare. "We didn't actually, did we?" He looked around to see he was indeed in his room. "I hope not," Loki replied as she looked around and saw the large pitcher of water by the bed. "I wanted to actually remember it." Loki gave up on the water and nodded off again. Conrad ignored her protests as he fumbled out of bed and fought through his hangover to stumble into the living room. Toon was gone from the world as her awareness resided completely within herself. He knew Alexia was not the kind of mare to be passive-aggressive in her anger when he did something to upset her. But he also knew that the longer she stewed about something, the worse the eventual blow-up would be. "Hey Alex. Can we talk about whatever happened last night?" He laid a hoof on her shoulder which broke her concentration and the three objects orbiting around her fell noisily to the floor. "Aw damn it, I was in the middle of fixing a..." She stopped at seeing his face that had such a nervous expression that he was literally sweating. "What's wrong?" He rubbed his foreleg to keep it from shaking. "I couldn't help but notice Loki slept in our bed, and I was wondering if he hesitated at the expectation of a furious unicorn. Did anything last night?" Toon's expression went from worry to irritation before settling on neutrality. "What part of being in a herd did you not understand? You aren't limited to sex with just me anymore, remember?" He visibly relaxed. "But for the record, no you didn't. I had to carry Crimson home in my magic. Loki and yourself were too hammered to do anything but drool on each other for a couple of minutes in bed before dozing off. So, you're not mad?" She grimaced more at him than anything else. She stood up and nuzzled him instead of kissing his alcohol breath. "Connie, how many times do I have to say this? I want us to be a herd." She stopped to look him in the eyes. "I know we're technically not in one yet, but if that technicality was enough to set me off, then I wouldn't be trying to convince you to go through with it. You know I love you." This time she did kiss him to spite the alcohol. "When I saw you two making out, if what you two were doing could actually be called making out," she added with an amused grin. "I searched my feelings to see if I felt jealousy or anger that you were with another mare. But you weren't with just another mare, you were with Loki. The same person I want in the herd. I didn't feel anything negative about you two drunkenly smacking your muzzles together. I felt happy for both of you, along with great amusement." She hugged him to demonstrate she did not feel wronged in any way. Excluding the alcohol, this is how we ponies work. The only thing not making us a herd is that we haven't gone through the wedding and eaten the flowers. I'm being totally honest with both you and myself when I say this. She pulled back and cupped his head in her forelegs and stared as deeply into his eyes as she could to drive it home. I love all three of you. We are a herd. You don't need my permission to show romantic affection with Loki or Crimson. She suspected he wanted some guidelines. But only Loki or Crimson. If you want to bring in a fourth mare, we need several dinner dates and movies together to get to know her better. He relaxed and nuzzled her. I can barely handle the thought of 3 mares. 4 would be pushing it. He caressed Toon, making her swoon from his touch. But I'll feel better about this after making it official at least. I can understand that. She broke contact so she could levitate the room back into proper order. Which is why I'd like to hold the wedding today, right here in the living room. So soon? I know we don't exactly lead a safe lifestyle, but... She gave him a deadpanned look. That's exactly the reason why. You almost died last time, and Loki the time before that. He fell silent, allowing her to continue. We don't have the luxury of a long-winded romance like you see in the movies. I want us to declare our love before anything can happen. You keep talking like that, and you'll jinx us. Then don't make me talk about it anymore, she countered. What about the princess? You wanted her to preside over it, right? I already talked to her about it, Toon replied as she summoned the tome. She'll be overseeing the last stages of the Dusk Guards training today, so she'll be available at any time today. But only long enough to do a short wedding. He knew she wouldn't go for a protracted and formal wedding even if she did had the time. Not to mention that the only article of clothing any pony had on camp were hats used by former servicemen to identify themselves. That made getting even a wedding veil impossible without ripping the drapes apart, let alone a whole dress. I suppose you'll also want to reveal the formation of herds to be the solution to the camp's overabundance of available mares. Well, that was the plan all along. He watched the silver unicorn walk off into the kitchen for some grub. It would make me feel better at having relations with Loki or Crimson after it's been made official. He cantered past the kitchen. I'll go get cleaned up and have the mares do the same so we can at least look proper. I'll get some brunch started. She called back. It took 2 hours for him to drag the mares out of bed and help them wake up in a 3-pony shower. As with Conrad and Loki before, Crimson had long since abandoned showering as a personal affair. By the time they were cleaned up and refreshed for the day, Alexia had time to prepare a full brunch with the meager supplies they kept in the kitchen. There wasn't a need to keep much food in the house when the mess hall was free. Crimson was gnawing on a pineapple while she spoke. You're holding the wedding now. Why not? Alexia replied. The only thing Conrad and I don't have that married couples do is a ring. I don't want to drag it out in some big to-do. Loki was all for it if that meant she could lay with Conrad all that sooner. Gurge gush. Ever since he said Alexia wanted to share him, I can't get his meat piston out of my head. I really need to get laid so I can think straight. So is there any sort of preparations we need to make? Conrad swallowed his alfalfa to answer. We need 12 flowers, 3 with colors as close to each of our main colors as possible. Crimson's medical studies kept her too busy to visit the farm. However, Loki had been by the farm recently. I know Misty is the big flower mare in town. I'm sure she can accommodate, but I don't think flowers come in your color there, Studley. Toon snickered at the comment and Conrad's slight unease. At least he's getting better about it. It'll take a bit of magic, but I can alter the color of a white flower to match him. They don't need to be perfect replicas of our main colors, just close enough. Loki shoveled the rest of her food down as fast as possible. Since me and Crimmy are the add-ons here, we'll go grab the flowers so you two can prepare and get the princess ready to go. That way we can get this jamboree over and done with. The green mare latched onto Crimson, who still had half a pineapple in her mouth. Come on girl, we got a herd to form. Anderson wasn't able to speak with the fruit in her mouth and couldn't remove it because one hoof was being absconded with by the concupiscent mare and the other was needed to keep her from falling on her face. Conrad snorted in amusement. Is it too late for a bachelor party? Toon brushed up against him and whipped his snout with the end of her tail. What good would that do you? We're always naked anyway. Besides, she added with a mischievous grin. You can look at other mares outside the herd all you want. Just don't touch. Really? I can look all I want? He queried with a smirk. She pecked him on the cheek. I spent most of my life as a man. I know how hard it is to keep eyes from wandering. Far be it for me to rap you over the head because of your biological instincts. Just keep that member of yours reserved for the three of us, okay? He was glad Toon was setting some boundaries. It would make any future missteps avoidable. Your wish is my command. He replied with a half-serious, half-joking tone. She finished her meal and placed them in the sink. If you can clean up here, I'll get the living room set up and see when Twilight can peel herself away from her duties. Not a problem. The living room was cleared in a similar fashion as Toon's meditation session, with the only real exception was that instead of a cushion in the center, it was the tome with the holographic princess speaking with the couple. That's the condensed version of the vows. It gets the major points while allowing for a little flair. Aside from being open to a herd, it's not overly different from typical vows we're used to, Conrad commented. Then again, I haven't been to a wedding since I was 12. Kind of odd that there needs to be a herd alpha though, Toon replied with bemusement. You would think that would have been phased out a while ago. Sparkle nodded in understanding. A healthy herd tries to find consensus on issues that affects the group. However, it's necessary when a new pony requests to join the herd or a difficult decision needs to be made, that the alpha leads the way. Can't imagine who they'll pick to be the leader, Alexia thought sarcastically. The door slammed open as the earth mares returned with 2 baskets of flowers balanced on their backs. It was a serious conscious effort on their part to keep from eating the delicious-smelling flowers early. Crimson was rather disappointed with the turnout. We could only get a few bunches of Annabelle hydrangea. Nothing else was in our colors. The stock was cleared out by the lunch crowd, Loki commented. Alexia watched them put the baskets down next to the alicorn. As long as they're white, we can rectify that. They're also quite small, but there are more than enough of them for the 4 of you. Loki was bouncing on her hooves in her excitement. I was hoping you'd say something like that. Sparkle looked to her student and then to the flowers. Care to do the honors? But of course. Toon used her magic to separate the flowers into 4 piles and cast her enchantments. Because the flowers were already heavily laden with earth pony magic from the florist who grew them, she only needed to tweak the mana to change the flowers. One by one the petals changed to azure, pink, crimson, and the unnatural flower color of steel. Twilight separated the azure and steel flowers in perfect thirds and brought one to Alexia and Conrad. Toon took the azure flowers in her magic and Conrad took the steel ones in the crook of his left wing. The alicorn took a central place in the room. Places. Alexia took her place in front of Twilight and to the right, while Conrad took his place to the left. Crimson and Loki stood further back to give them appropriate space. Twilight kept her massive grin under control so she could conduct herself like her station demanded for this historic occasion. A shame I can't do a full and proper ceremony with them, but such is the way of things. Mares and gentle colt. We are gathered here today to announce the union of these 2 wonderful ponies. They have demonstrated time and again that they share a bond that goes beyond friendship and into something deeper and more meaningful. Yet the tenets of both friendship and love are the same. Loyalty. It is the bedrock of any relationship. Generosity. To always remember that the most prized possession is not money or jewels. Sparkle glanced between the 4 ponies, but each other. Honesty. The truth creates stronger, surer bonds than a lie ever will. Kindness. It is a quality that should flow from a pony's heart as readily as water in a river. And last but certainly not least, laughter. Laughter is the fire and passion that keeps the herd energetic and ties all the other aspects of the group together. Twilight turned to the grinning mare. Alexia Toon. You have been nominated to assume the role of herd alpha. Do you accept the responsibility of leading your herd to a bright future and to ensure their well-being in all things? The idea of an alpha still irked Alexia as slightly archaic, but conceded to the position as being part of a pony-style wedding. The unicorn nodded. I do. The princess turned to Conrad. Do you, Conrad, wish to join Alexia Toon in all of her future endeavors? To help both her and the herd through times both light and dark, and consent to her position as alpha? He stood proudly and nodded, I do. Sparkle allowed her smile to break through her tactful mask. It is time for the exchange of color. Toon gave Conrad her small collection of azure flowers while he did the same with his steel ones. Sparkle continued. Let the world know at a glance, of your devotion to one another. Both ponies ate their respective partners' flowers. As soon as Toon swallowed the last petal, a noticeable stripe of hair on the left side of her horn changed color. Starting from the roots to the tips of each strand, a half-inch lock of her bangs turned steel in color. For Conrad, a 1-inch thick lock of hair near dead center up his neck became a rich azure. Twilight had a look of composed approval. I now pronounce the couple is ready to form a herd. May it grow and prosper. The couple kissed and embraced each other for a few amorous seconds as Twilight stepped back to give them room to demonstrate that the ceremony had ended. Sparkle tactually walked around the loving couple to speak with the Earth Mares. Loki voiced the shared question. What about the two of us? This was only to symbolize the couple's willingness to form a herd. It takes 3 or more individuals to actually make one, the purple mare explained. After this, the level of formality and the actual formation of the herd is left entirely up to the initial couple. Although I doubt you'll have to wait long. Alexia and Conrad broke contact to find the alicorn standing nearby. I wish I could stay longer, but I have important matters I must tend to. I wish good luck to the 4 of you. With that, the princess vanished. Loki bounded over with the 2 baskets of flowers on her back, while Crimson simply walked over. So when can we get on this herd stuff? Alexia giggled at the green mare's antics. Right away. She broke the pink flowers into 3 bunches and passed them out with her magic. She adopted a half-joking tone. Loki, would you like to join us to turn this couple into a herd? Would I? Just show me the dotted line. The unicorn broke enough of the steel and azure flowers off and passed them to the green mare. Then let's exchange colors. As she ate, a pink strip of hair, equal in size to the steel-colored one, developed to the left of the other foreign stripe in Alexia's mane. A pink strip appeared below the azure one in Conrad's mane, and an azure and steel-colored stripe replaced a 2-inch segment of Loki's pink mane upon the middle of her neck. The trio faced Crimson, who had her flowers in a basket and brought them over to the group before setting it down at Alexia's hooves. I wish to submit my entry fee to join the popular clique. Toon snickered as she distributed the last of the flowers. Granted. Soon enough, a 2-toned crimson stripe appeared in everyone's mane. Anderson grinned fiercely at the azure, steel, and pink colors appearing in her own. Conrad lifted Alexia's altered colors away from her eyes. There was still some azure on the far left side of her bangs, with the right side remaining fully azure. I think they suit you quite well. She flicked his azure, pink, and crimson stripes. I could say the same about you, handsome. Loki quickly assumed a begging position. Glorious leader. Can I have the first round with our Studley stallion? Toon could smell the readiness of the desperate mare's labia and glanced at Conrad, who wordlessly nodded his consent to whatever she decided. I can hardly say no to that when I've had him all to myself for these past few months. Clop ahead. I write sci-fi, not porn, so it's probably bad. Loki's eyes widened in sheer carnal delight before pouncing Conrad to the ground and planting a longing kiss on him. I want you to ravage me. Shouldn't we go in the other room? He offered. Why should we? Loki countered. We're an official herd. There are no boundaries between us. She nuzzled him amorously, and shuddered at the scent of his arousal. I don't care if they watch or not. But I need this now. Conrad looked to Alexia and Crimson, who sat beside each other a few feet away. Toon answered his unspoken question. What better way to cement the herd than to witness each other's love? But first, her horn lit up and a brief glow encased Loki, Conrad, and Crimson. A contraceptive spell for everyone. I believe we can all agree to no more pregnancies for a while. She was met with a chorus of affirmatives. He faced Crimson, who replied in a similar manner. Don't you dare hold back. I want to know what to expect for my first time. Never performed for a crowd before, but I can get into that if it's just with the herd. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. As the brown and green ponies expressed their love together, Crimson felt a strange happiness flood over her. She was already excited about not only being one with Alexia's herd, but in that she would have sex as a mare for the first time as soon as Loki and Conrad were finished. Yet she felt more than that. I don't feel a hint of jealousy. Only joy that my herd mates are in love. She looked at Alexia, who was watching as well. The unicorn turned to wrap a leg around Anderson into a sidelong hug. Toon whispered so she wouldn't disturb the copulating ponies, but loud enough to be heard over their grunts and moans. I'm glad you're with us in this. I am too. She hesitated for a moment at seeing the crimson stripe in Alexia's mane, and knew in the back of her mind that she had a lock of azure hair in her own. It's as if we've incorporated a part of each other within ourselves. We are separate, but one. She felt an impulse to show her alpha how much she really loved being in the herd and kissed Toon on the lips. Alexia was surprised by it, and Anderson broke the kiss early out of fear she had taken a misstep. I am sorry, I don't know what came over me. It must have been a relapse. She tried to break from the hug, but Alexia held fast and returned the despairing Earthmare's attention to her. Crimmy, listen, I'm not upset. And no, it wasn't a relapse. Anderson briefly glanced at Loki, who was the poster child of lust as the herd stallion rutted her with a vengeance. Her attention returned to the calm face of Alexia. But I thought I was straight. Have I been fooling myself the whole time? Toon kissed the fretting mare with a passionate caress. Crimson was shocked at first, but let herself fall into her alpha's loving touch. Several moments passed before Alexia broke it to speak. Crimmy. You can't be afraid to show love with your other herd mates besides Conrad. You mean, that we mares are bi? Toon was only mildly aware of Loki's increasingly high-pitched moans and nuzzled Crimson with unreserved affection. Not exactly. Tell me, Crimmy, do you want to have sex with me? Search yourself carefully before answering. The pale yellow mare sat there in Alexia's loving embrace. She reciprocated the silver mare's nuzzle and breathed her scent in as deeply as possible. She relished it all, but in the end, she didn't want to go any further than that. Despite the love she felt for Alexia, the hunger that had been gnawing on her for the past few days completely absent. No matter how much the earth pony looked into Toon's caring and loving eyes, there was not a drop of lust for the silver mare present in her psyche. Yet all it took was one look at the thrusting stallion who was nearing climax to feel her loins respond in earnest. She looked back at Toon. No. I don't want to do that to you. She returned her gaze at Conrad. I want him instead. Alexia smirked before pecking the yellow mare on the muzzle. I feel the same, and I know Loki does as well. Both mares' ears perked at the sound of Loki's screams reaching a crescendo, followed by shuddering moans of satisfaction as she rode the orgasmic waves of pleasure. Conrad used his experiences with Alexia to prolong the green mare's climax as long as possible before her forelegs buckled out from under her. Toon whispered to Crimson. Why don't you initiate some foreplay so he has time to recover? The two mares walked up to the heavily breathing stallion with Toon speaking up. I dare say you've been holding out on me, Conrad. She glanced at Loki, who was a symbol of bliss. I don't think I've had a look of satisfaction that strong for months. Loki answered for him. Yeah, well, you go for over 4 months without a lay and see how well you feel once you've been ridden. Touché, Alexia replied with a titter. Her attention went to Conrad. Marvelous show. He bowed his head as if he was a thespian of the higher arts. Anything for my fair ladies. Speaking of which, Alexia nudged Crimson. You're going to love it, I know I do. Anderson sat down next to Conrad, whose breathing was improving. I'm in no hurry, so I can wait for you to recover. He silently thanked Alexia as he suspected that was her idea. I'm all for that. Crimson was mildly aware of Alexia hoisting the green pony in her magic and taking her into the bedroom so she could finish cooling off. Anderson helped Conrad to sit back up on his haunches so she could nuzzle him in the same amorous manner she had seen Alexia do 100 times before. She didn't kiss him on the lips for a few minutes so he would be free to level out his breathing. In the meantime she buried her nose in his fur and mane while both of them wrapped their forelegs around themselves to press each other as close as possible. The attention was not allowing his wings to loosen back up and they remained stiff. The pale yellow mare felt her arousal climb the more she dragged her muzzle against his fur, and breathed his musk. Loki's scent was strong on him, but the smell of her herd mate only fueled her lust for him even further. When his breathing finally leveled out, he gently pulled her head up and planted a strong kiss upon her. He was far different than Alexia's earlier kiss. Toon had the soft gentle caress of a mare, but Conrad was hard and forceful in his affection. Anderson found the differences astounding, and that his was much more preferable. Crimson swooned and allowed him to completely take over the hungering embrace. He broke the kiss to come up for air and at knowing by her scent that she was fully ready. You want to take the final plunge? He asked. Crimson pecked him one last time. More than ever. Alexia walked back into the room just in time to witness Conrad cleave Anderson's flower, eliciting a piercing shriek from the pale yellow mare. Toon watched from the sidelines as the last member of the herd was acquainted with female sex. Crimson's initial scream was the only one she had as Conrad's expert motions shot such constant alien pleasure through the pale yellow mare that she couldn't respond to anything. As with Loki before, Anderson couldn't keep her hooves underneath her after her first orgasm started to come down. She collapsed to the floor a panting mess of sweat. Conrad was utterly spent and could barely keep from falling on his side to rest. Alexia let them bask in the afterglow for a minute before walking over. Loki had recovered by then and made her way to the rest of her herd. You can't imagine how badly I needed that samurai. I can guess, he teased. Toon sat down next to the lone stallion and gave him a sidelong hug. If you're worried about round 3, I can wait till morning when you're fully rested. She nibbled on his ear. I want you at your best when it's my turn. You're too kind, my lady. He nickered, and was content to just lean on her. Anderson found her strength and stood up in time for the herd to share a group hug that lasted for several silent minutes that was only disturbed by heavy breathing. Toon saw the other ponies' 3 stripes of color in their manes and fell in love all over again. Alexia found herself in the center of this embrace and savored the euphoria of a complete herd. All of the love and caring they shared with each other coupled with the apex joy that the herd mentality could produce caused all 4 of the ponies' magic to fluctuate. Within Conrad's itinerous system, several capillaries condensed beneath his QD marks and his mana started to coalesce into twin motes of power. The same process repeated itself in the mares as well. Had any of them been looking, they would have seen their QD marks glow faintly for several minutes. Once that time passed, the capillaries in each pony retreated and returned to normal, but the motes of magic remained, and continued to grow. Not from just the 4 ponies in the room, but they drew power from every pony in the camp. It was very slow, and imperceivable to even Alexia's heightened magical senses, but it was steady. The unicorn made a decision. I will show the camp my answer to the off-balanced gender ratio tomorrow. Let's see if they still insist on calling me princess after I rock their preconceptions of marriage. For now though, she was content to enjoy her herd mate's company.